And then if we go to the real property report again, we'll see that this is a scale drawing that's done by a surveyor, and they will have specific numbers on here that tell you how big things are. So we can see that they've written some numbers and a few information lines in here. So they'll tell you what the distance is from the property line to the corner of the house, from this corner of the house to the back property line, how big the overall property is. And they're also going to show where the city sidewalk is, because the property lines don't reach the city sidewalk usually, or the street. There's always a gap there that the city tends to own. And a lot of people are surprised by that. Sometimes it's quite a significant amount of property that isn't really yours. So that's why having this document is very important. And you can guess at things and look at people's other people's fence lines and what they've done on their property to kind of have a good idea. But it's really valuable information. I've been on people's properties where the fence is actually 2 feet one side or the other of the property line. So people are either giving away 2 feet or the neighbor has lost some land. So that's why it's good to have this. However, it is too small for us to design on. So our first order of business in creating a scale drawing is to go outside and take some measurements. I have some practice making measurements, so I have a little system for you that I hope will be super easy for you to accomplish what you need to do out in the garden. So we're going to create 3 different pieces of paper. One is going to show the house that you have. I'm doing an easy one, which is a rectangle. We'll talk more later about how to measure and draw some more complicated shapes. So if you have a window and then a door, this is how I show them, just with a W and a D. And if there's a basement window underneath of the window, I'll write BW and put a couple extra lines for that. And sometimes it can get very, very busy and complicated as you're putting all of the things on the wall. So if there was a gas meter for here, for example, right here, I would write gas with a little X. And I might write electric over here. And I might write tap. And what I'm going to do when I go outside is hook my tape measure onto this corner and walk this direction with the tape measure. So if your wall is small, you could use a small tape measure, hook it on the corner, and just keep walking. So the difference of what I'm suggesting is that we're not going to take small measurement here, measure the window, measure the door, all the way along, because it gets kind of busy and complicated. So normally I'm using a large tape measure, again hooking it on the wall and reading the numbers off as I go. So the way this is going to look on your paper as you're measuring, you're going to write 0 where you're starting, and you're going to, I'll do this in a different color, you're going to say this might be 3, 5, the electric meter might be at 8, door at 10, 13, 15, the tap might be at 18, and the house might be at 25. And you're going to measure the basement window might be at 3 and 4. Maybe it's just a small one. So that's how that wall will look measured and the numbers. So in order to keep it less complicated, I turn my clipboard and I will do the same thing on the other wall. So in this case, there might be a couple of basement windows, and I'm going to go from here, and this one might be at 5, 8, 12, 15, and maybe the house is at 20. So you'll see that I'm writing my numbers in the same direction as the wall is that I'm measuring. So again, I would be sure to write 0 and measure all in one direction like this. So that's going to follow for each wall of the house. You'll put windows, doors, and you might come across landings. Anything that's fixed, permanent, you're going to make sure that you measure that. So in this case, we'll say this is 0, 2, 5, 8, 13, and the landing might be at 14, the door might be at 15. So this is how you're deciding how it's going to look. So you can see there's a lot of numbers there, but if you're really careful to write them along the plane of the wall, then you're going to find it all makes quite a lot of sense and is easy to do. So that's the first type of measuring you'll do. If you have a garage, you'll do the same thing, or a shed. So every building that you have, measure around the sides of them in that nice orderly fashion, using more pieces of paper as you need them. And next we're going to go back around. So again, we're keeping it nice and tidy with our measuring. So every house or building, you'll sketch those on. So in this case, we might show the garage and the house this time. And you are going to have some property lines. I'm going to show an angled one here just to give you an example. So in order to plot these lines, you need to have two measurements from the house. I always treat the house as the main thing that I'm plotting on the plan first. It's always going to be drawn on the square's square, and the property lines are going to angle from that. So if you have measured, this is 5, this one will be 5. So you'll know that you have a straight line going through here. But on this side, it might only be 4 and it might be 6 over here. So the line will automatically look after itself over on this side. So the garage might be 3 and 3. And in this case, it might be 22 and 25. And hopefully, these two measurements will make this line continue. So we're going to turn our clipboard then, and we're going to add a few more measurements. So here's the back lane. We'll want to know how far it is to the back lane, and from both corners, in case this lane is not square, you might find there's a bit of an angle to it. So then we are going to go to the front yard as well, and as I explained before, we're going to measure right to the street because the real property report doesn't show it right to the street usually. So this one might be 23, and you might find that this one's 23 as well. So if we look at what we've got done here, garage and house, there are two measurements for most corners except for this house one. So you can see that we're going to bump into the house. The house is going to bump into the garage here, but we're going to write that in anyway. It might be 20 feet. And we're going to hook the tape measure on here and go all the way to the lane. So this one might be 45. So now when we look at this, we have two measurements there, two measurements there, two measurements there, there, and there. So the only one that doesn't have two measurements is the garage. So we can go back and we can we can confirm that this is 20 feet. And in this case, I probably would just not bother with this one because it's going to be 20 as well. But you'd have to line up with the corner visually. So our goal is to really have 2 measurements for each corner of the house, and that way you will find a lot of your property lines on a basic shaped yard. So that's the second round of measuring, and there's going to be one more round, and this is where we tie in all the funny things that are already in the property. There could be trees, sidewalks, the neighbors could have things. So again, we'll make another drawing, and we're going to show this property line and this one, and in this case the neighbor might have a garage. This neighbor might have a deck that looks down into your yard that you want to be aware of. This one could have a large tree. You might have your own tree. A couple trees in the front. And you're just going to write what it is. This is the house, garage. So your objective this time is to plot where these things are. So my usual way is I might start at 0 where this house is. I hook it on the fence here, and I'm keeping inside of my own property, of course. And then as I'm walking past the deck, I'm saying it's at 14. So I'm walking this direction, and I find where that house has a deck. And then in this case, we're going to measure this direction to find the tree. So again, 2 measurements for each tree. You could say it's at 12, and we're going that direction. So what happens if it's an angled property line like this is I will make sure I'm straight with the house right here, and I hook my tape measure onto the fence going that direction. Now I start measuring this way, and I'll see the tree is at 15, the garage at 16, the other end of the garage is at 26. And I might go all the way to the end of their fence, for example, and write that in. So now I know where everyone's fences are. I know where their trees are. And I can plot pretty much everything. So if the tree is outside of the house, it's really the same process. We're going to start with 0 here. We're kind of coming along here this direction until we're in line with the tree. We're going to say 20. And then what we'll do is measure from here to here so that we get where that tree is. So this might be 0, and it might be 8 feet over. So you'll notice I'm writing the numbers where the item is and not in between. So it doesn't matter which way I turn my drawing, I can figure out what it was I was measuring, and got some really good information. So that's the third round of measuring that you'll do. So to recap, we've measured around the house. We've measured from each corner of the house. And then we've taken an inventory of what the neighbors have and measured on their trees and buildings, and especially things like trampolines and tree houses that are looking down into your yard. It's nice to have a little bit of screening or something on your side if you like. So those are the documents that you'll need, and once you're finished with that, we'll move on to the next part, is how to draw to scale and what kind of grid paper you might want to have and that sort of thing. So good luck with measuring.